All right, this is how you're going to finish off your two-point perspective. Here's a drawing that a student did, and she finished it off very nicely. It's neat and clean. It looks great. She's got a lot of detail in it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to trim this down on the paper cutter. So let me show you how to do that. I'm going to trim it down because I'm going to mount it. I'm going to do what's called dry mounting it on another sheet of paper. So when I trim this down, make sure that when you get in the paper cutter, you butt this up against the top edge here. Now this is super important, okay? When you bring this arm down, push a lot in this direction and make sure it's really tight and bring it down rather swiftly. So I'm going to bring this down here. I'm trimming my paper down, okay? Maybe I'll take just a little bit off this side and maybe a little off the bottom. So I'll take a little bit off each side. Hopefully you've got a little extra room to do that in. And I'm making sure I line this up with the lines that are on the table. I don't want to let this slip and all of a sudden it's on an angle and I cut it crooked. Also, you don't want to bring this down really loose. If I bring this arm down loose, watch what happens to this. It didn't cut it, or it barely cut it, okay? I have to bring it down really tight in this direction and bring it down kind of swift. Don't cut your hands and cut it swift like that. So one more cut on here, just gonna line this up, okay? And make sure it's lined up with the lines that are on the table and sliced it. So I just trim my sheet down. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you how we are going to do what's called dry mounting. So take a look here, and I'm gonna mount this on this black paper that I have, okay? So what I'm gonna do first here, I think I gotta bring it up just a little bit higher. So here's my paper. And what I'm gonna do is I wanna center this on the paper. So I'm going to just kind of eyeball it so that I get it centered and I get the border somewhat the same. If you've got a really skinny border here and a real fat border on the top, so just try to center it, okay? Now I'm just gonna eyeball it and make sure that it's somewhat centered. Now, next thing, I'm gonna take a white pencil. Now you can use a regular pencil. It doesn't have to be a white pencil. I'm only using white so you can see it in my demonstration. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mark the corners like this. Now you should probably use a regular pencil because you don't want your marks to be so dark. Like I said, I'm only using white because I know that'll stand out in the drawing. So when I take this away now, I can see the white marks here on each of the corners, okay? Now what I'm gonna do is this. We're gonna do something called dry mounting. Dry mounting is when you take rubber cement. Now I got rubber cement in here, and you're gonna take a jar of rubber cement. Now when I open this up, you'll see that the rubber cement is kind of this thick liquid. If it's really thick and globby, sort of like snot, don't use it, okay? This is nice and thin and somewhat smooth. Now what I'm gonna do with that is I'm gonna clean a little bit off my brush, and I make sure you close this up as soon as you're done with it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna brush this right up here along that edge right there, okay? And then I'll rotate it and I'll put a little bit more, maybe some right here. Now don't put big globs along there. And then I'll do it right here, okay? And then I'll do a little bit right here on this edge. And then I'm just gonna put a spot in the middle like that, okay? So I put rubber cement on. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let that dry. That seems funny. I'm gonna let it dry. So if I take, let me just grab a piece of scrap paper. If I put a little rubber cement on this piece of paper right here, okay, just a little bit on here, and I let that dry, and then I put a little bit on this side of this container right here, just a little bit like that, okay? I'm gonna let that dry too. You're gonna see dry rubber cement sticks really well to dry rubber cement. So I take this sheet, you can take it off to the side and let it dry. Now I'm gonna take my other sheet that my drawing was on. I'm gonna flip that over, and I ripped this off another thing, so it's got a little black on the back. Normally you won't have that. So I'm gonna lay this on some newspaper, okay? I'm gonna take my rubber cement and I'm going to brush it along the edges, right off the edge on a newspaper. That way I know that the rubber cement goes right up to the edge of my paper and goes off the paper onto that newspaper below. And the reason I'm putting newspaper down is because I don't want rubber cement all over my table. So I'm gonna do that, and I let that dry. So it went around the corners, a little spot in the middle, okay? Now I'm gonna let that dry. In the meantime, I don't need this newspaper underneath there anymore. So I'm gonna take this away and just fold it up and put it in a recycling box. No longer need it, okay? So I'm gonna let that dry and let this dry. Okay? If you want to speed up the drying, you could fan it or something, but it doesn't take very long to dry. Now, earlier you saw I put some rubber cement on this. Well, if I put it on the side here, you can see it's not going to stick very well. Okay, but if I put it on the spot that had rubber cement, it's hard to see, but it's right here. If I put it on that rubber cement spot, it sticks really well. Okay, matter of fact, sometimes it sticks so well that if you try pulling it off, you'll tear it. So I should be able to get this off. So anyhow, this is how it's going to work. I'm going to take my sheet like this. This is now dry. I can feel it. It's tacky. It's not wet anymore, and it's dry on this sheet. I'm going to lay this right over the top. Now, it's important that you get it lined up perfectly, so I'm just going to stretch it and kind of let it hover over the top right now. I'm going to line it up on those corners, and then I'm just going to kind of let it settle down, okay? Now, I'm going to push it down, but I'm not going to push from the outside in because you might get a hump in the middle of your paper. Instead, you're going to push from the inside out. So I'll just take some scrap paper and kind of go like this. And the reason I put the scrap paper down is so I don't smear my pencil. And I'm going to go from the inside out. Now, if you got any extra rubber cement along the edges, sometimes when you get up close, I don't know if you can see this, but I got a little extra rubber cement here. And you can just take your clean finger and rub that little excess rubber cement off the edges. Okay, so I do that around my edges right now, and I get the excess rubber cement off. Okay? Now, if you did this right, your paper is mounted on here, and this is mounted so securely that you can't even get your fingernail underneath the edge here. Okay? Last thing you're going to do is you're going to put a label on your project. You're going to print off some labels on a sheet like this. You're going to trim them down so they have just a fine little line around the outside. Of course, you'll put your name on here. The subject, this would be Drawing and Painting 1, grade 9 if that's your grade, and the title of your drawing. I call this one My Town. I'm going to take a little bit of tape, put 2 rolls of tape on the back here, and connect this to the back. Okay? Now, I'm going to have another video that I'll show you. It's probably only about a minute, and it is how to make your labels. So we're going to make those on the computer. I sent them Google Classroom. You'll take this. Now, I want these all uniform. This is going to be down here near the corner. Okay, I want it to be about, a 1/4 inch from this side and 1/4 inch from this side. Put your label here. Now, typically, we'll have a project that has a much wider border, okay? So I might have a project like this one here. You know, if it was this project, then this has just got tape on the back now, see that? So if it was here, just 2 little rolls of tape. And all I'm going to do is go and put this about a 1/4 inch from the bottom, a 1/4 inch from the side. And that's going to be the uniform way that we're going to put our labels on our projects for display. Now, not all of our projects are display, but all your projects, you will still photograph this and you'll post it into Google Slides. But we're going to be handing this one in because I want to put these on display. So you'll put your label in the bottom right corner and you're going to print your label out, and I'll show you how to do that in another video.